you for joining us, where we are going through Lesson 1B. Well, we're going through the whole chapter of Lesson 1, to be honest, in this Sunday Meetup 1B. And just as a quick recap for everybody, and then we're just going to jump into the practice, to be honest, because that's always the best way. And then we can make sure we can find out what we understand and what we don't understand, what we've forgotten and what we have remembered. So we've said that there are 3 words in Arabic, 3 categories of word in Arabic, and they are in order of strength. And as I'm saying these, you can type them in the chat bar just to be active if you wish, and just to reinforce what we've done. So nouns, verbs, particles, and the strongest are nouns because we can conceptualize them in our minds independently of anything else, like a cat, or an abstract noun like love. Although we're conceptualizing the associations around that abstract noun, not the actual noun itself, which is impossible. So that was the first thing. And then after we understood how to after we defined those and understood how to identify them, now we moved into the types of sentence, didn't we? And we said there's 2 types of sentence. What are those sentences? We have noun sentences and verb sentences. And noun sentences are sentences that have 2 elements. What are they? Subject and news. And when we say that, this is an important point I didn't really reiterate or state, sorry, in the last lesson, is that there's only one essential word that will be the subject and one essential word that would be the news. There's some situations where that's not the case, but that's the principle. And that is what we call the primary element. So we have 2 words in the sentence that will be the primary elements. One of them is a subject, one of them is the news. Everything else that's not is not the primary element, it's a secondary element. And we have secondary complementary elements and secondary independent elements. Leave that for the time being, I don't want to get too complicated. But fundamentally, everything before the is the subject. Everything after the is the news. So it's if the is a wall, you imagine that is acting like a wall when you translate, and you circle what's before it, that's the subject. You circle what's after it, that's the news. And the first word in each grouping, the words before is and the words after is, the first word of each that section is the primary element. It's always the first word. And I'll try to show that in the examples that we do tonight. So that's a noun sentence. And then we come to verb sentences. And what's the fundamental elements? Fundamental elements, the primary elements of a verb sentence. Be very careful in answering it. Verb, subject. Yeah, not news. No. Don't remember that word subject in Arabic is not the same word as a subject in Arabic in a noun sentence. So we translate subject in Arabic, we have subject and news, which we call in Arabic mubtada is the subject, khabar is the news, and then we have let's do the verb subject in a verb sentence. Verb we call fi'l, and subject we call fa'il. So notice subject in a noun sentence is a mubtada. Subject in a verb sentence is a fa'il. It's a completely different word. So don't mix up those 2 subjects that we translate as the same word in English, but they're not the same word in Arabic. You can see at the back of the chapter in your folder those terms in Arabic just before the answer. Notice that there is an answer key at the end of each chapter. Some people don't realise that until like halfway through the course. So verb, subject, and that's the assumed order. We have verb first and then subject. We can reverse it, but that's not the assumed sentence order. And then sometimes we have what we call an object. I eat couscous. And couscous is the object, is the one getting eaten. And that's not a primary element. It could be removed from the sentence. We call it a secondary independent element. Like stands alone, by itself as the object, but it's not a primary element. It can be removed from the sentence and the sentence still stands, it still has a meaning. Okie dokie? So that's what we've studied, I think. Anyone got any questions before I put you all into breakout rooms? Muhammadun Nabiyyun. So Muhammad is a prophet. This is a noun sentence, and it has two aspects to it, or two elements to it. The subject, the mubtada, we call it in Arabic, and the khabar, the news. So Muhammad is a subject, Nabiyyun is a news, and they're two primary elements. Ana kabirun. I am old, it could be, or great, or big. But kabir usually refers to age when it comes to humans, and it refers to size when it's non-human. So when it refers to humans, it refers to age, not like big in terms of he's fat or something like that, or big build. But for objects, non-humans, it refers to size. Ana is a subject, and kabirun is the news. They're both primary elements, and is coming between both the two nouns in both these examples. Hada dinun, this is a religion. We're going to see with deen, it depends on the context how you translate it. It's a good example of how words don't, and often a lot of words don't have an inherent meaning. It depends where, well, they have an inherent meaning, but their translation is not fixed, and it depends on their context. Like Yawmuddin, we're going to say the day of religion. This is a religion. Question. Or did someone just accidentally unmute themselves?
No, that was me. Dinu. So we've got religion here. Could it be a faith?
No.
Well,
Sunil, you're not wrong there to some degree, because we often say there are many religions and there are many faiths, and we mean religion when we say that. So if you're speaking from that perspective, yes. But as I said, we've got to be like, faith is more often, and this depends. Like especially in Protestant Christianity, they focus a lot on faith rather than belief, or it's the other way round, because they talk about a relationship with God rather than having dogma and believing in tenets and stuff. So faith is often used as a word over religion to express a more relational engagement with God and the fellowship. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but then so one would say, but that then the implication of that would be that Islam, if we say Islam is a deen. Then there's a hint of dogmatism and
there's nothing. Well, there's not. Dogma is not a negative word. It's been made a negative word. Like dogma was made negative because no one liked the Catholics, because Catholics have a lot of dogma. That's my understanding anyway. Dogma just means something that you know there are absolutes. And we have dogma in like in terms of we have some fundamentals. So, but it's definitely got a negative connotation, and there are obviously when people have a dogma, it can become what we say dogmatic, isn't it? And we mean in that negatively, meaning that we impose and throw, and there's no sense of free will around these things, and so that's more of a cultural thing. The actual term dogma, in its inherent meaning, is like fundamentalist. The term fundamentalist, it's not a bad word, fundamentalist, but it's been made negative because it has connotations now. So, but deen literally means something you bind yourself to, which is a dogma, if you think about it, because you do bind yourself to certain things that you hold to, and so. That's the problem with language. I think what you've highlighted here, Sunhild, is the problem with language is that you can't separate it from a culture, can you? Because it has, within that culture, it has certain understandings. And that's why it's so important to understand words in Arabic. Usually we can get, especially the Quranic Arabic, we can get a purer understanding of the word. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, the religion. I mean, the word religion that I remember comes also from the Latin religare, to bind together.
Yeah. So it's the same. Yeah. So
the same as.
Yeah, it's the same concept. You bind yourself to something. I love. Nabila said, "I don't like dogma. I prefer Katzma." I love that. Anyway, no problem. Yeah, if you look up the word dogma, Rihanna, what would be useful is looking at the etymology etymological root. You'll get that if you usually on a Google search, you can go down and see the origins of the word. But yeah, it's often a battle between Protestants, I can't pronounce the word, Protestants and Catholics. I think I've got an issue with Protestants now. I was raised in a Protestant family, so that's probably my issue. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent there.
Are you protesting against the Protestants?
Oh God! Stop it! It's going to take it.
Sorry, I'm in a very troublemaker mood today, evidently.
Let's get on with some language, or we're going to. So, Hada Dinon, this is a religion. Let's just keep it simple, okay? For the time being. So Hada subject is a subject, Dinon is a news, which people often make the mistake there because they say, no, Deen, religion is a subject, because that's what we're talking about. No, but this is ambiguous. What's that? It's a religion. So religion is a subject, what we're talking about. No, we're saying this thing is a religion. So our focus is on this, and then we're giving information about this. Okay? So, where are we? Qara'a Zaydun kitaban. Now, one of you had a very good question about this. Is that this is a verbal sentence, so we're not dealing with subject and news. We go Qara'a verb, Zaydun subject, kitaban is the object. Now, they said, why is it kitaban with double fatha there? And forget that alif. That alif is just appears when you have a double fatha on a noun. Notice Muhammadun Nabiyun, the default of a noun sentence is that everything has these double dhammas or one dhamma on it. And we'll study that later in the next chapter. So, but in a verbal sentence, only one noun takes this double dhamma. See it, Zaydun? If you have anything other than the subject afterwards, it's in the fatha state, what we will call the fatha state. And that's what we call the object. And it's Qara'a Zaydun are the two primary elements. This kitaban is a secondary independent element, meaning it stands alone, it has a meaning in itself in a sentence as it's the object, and it can be removed as well. Al-yawmu adhimun, the day is great. So the day is subject. Notice it's got one dhamma because it's got an al, we're going to study that later. And this has got two dhammas because it's got no al. Today, it can translate as the day or today, because the day, what we're referring to is today. And it depends on the context. That is great, or is a great thing, you could say as well, or a great one. Ar-rasulu ala sirat, the messenger is on the path, or the bridge, or the sirat is literally path, it's not a bridge. That's a secondary meaning that and it's not in the Quran. It's the Quran. There's no let me get this right. There is no explicit mention of sirat in that context, either bridge over the hellfire. That's more from hadith. It's not dismissing that, but in Arabic, in the Quran, sirat is the focus on a path. Al-Islamu dinun adhiman. Now we're getting interested. Oh, sorry, I forgot. So Ar-Rasul is the subject. The messenger is, so everything after is the news. Ala sirat. So we see here, when we've got preposition, ala, or particle, let's say. Ala sirat is the news, and it's two words. Al-Islamu dinun adhiman. Islam is a religion great. Now, this is a complex structure we have not studied yet. I just want to see if you can work it out. So we know the is goes where there's no al. So Islam is religion great. And then you're saying, well, that doesn't make sense. In Arabic, azim is a secondary complementary element. A secondary complementary element means an adjective or a clarifier. And we'll study clarifiers later. So Islam is a great religion. So literally, Islam is a religion great. But in Arabic, we do it the other way around. We don't say a great religion, because the logic is you mention the primary element first, which is a religion. That's the main, and then we describe it, and that's secondary. So English has got it back to front. Allahu Rahmanun fid dunya. Allah is merciful. Let's just keep it as merciful. Allah is merciful in this world, merciful in the next. But the translation doesn't capture, obviously, the nuance here. He's all-encompassing in his mercy in this life, and he's very specific in his mercy. That's the meaning here in the next life to certain peoples. So Allah subject, Rahmanun news, Rahmanun fid dunya is that all of the news there. Rahimun fil akhirah is a new sentence because the origin is Allahu Rahmanun fid dunya, Allahu Rahimun fil akhirah. So Allah, the subject's not mentioned here, and the Rahimun fil akhirah is the news. So there's two sentences there, and you could have translated it as such. This is a complex structure we haven't studied yet. Remember, I said this chapter is exposure to a lot of the Arabic language, and I just want to see if you can work it out without knowing the grammar here. So the sentence translates as, the name of the Muslim is Zayd. If anyone's got different translations, please do share them in the chat group, in the chat bar, and we can talk about those. It's important. I want to see differences, and I want to see mistakes even, so I can get an understanding of why you're seeing it in that way, and how it's supporting you to see it in the correct way if it is a mistake. Or there are possibilities, like for example, the Muslim's name, or the name of the Muslim, you could say that. Yeah, he's great. No, it's Zayd. Is Zayd there, Rihanna? Zayd is a person, just a name. But the Muslim's name, that's fine. Or the name of the Muslim. Next one, a verbal sentence again. And we say Ismul Muslim is the subject. Is Zayd, so what comes after is the news. So Zayd is the news. قعد النبي على العرش. It's a verbal sentence. قعد is a verb. Nabi is a subject because it's got dhamma. And then على العرش is the object. The Prophet sat on the throne. The primary element being قعد and Nabi, and على العرش is a secondary element. It can be removed. Here we go now. هذا يوم الدين. This is the day of retribution, probably, or accountability, you could even say. But accountability is more hisab. So deen is almost you're bound to something. Yes, Rihanna, that's not wrong. Judgment, I'm not saying that's wrong, and that's how it's often translated. But judgment almost, it's that everyone will be bound by one law. I mentioned this in the videos, I'm sure I did, is that you're bound by something, and that can imply judgment. It's a very difficult word to translate. It's about being bound by basically the rules that Allah's going to, no one can say, oh, excuse me, I don't live by these rules, on that day, and say, I have a different system I work by, can we just please work by that one? No, everyone's bound bound by what they did as well. We can take this in many ways of looking at it. Bound and held accountable for what they did, or held, or the law, the way that Allah will address everyone will be one, and everyone's bound by that. So Hada is the subject, Yawmuddin is the news. And this is a complex structure, Yawmuddin, just like Ismul Muslim. This is what we call possessive construct. We're going to study that way later in about lesson 5. So remember, this first chapter is just a bit of exposure. Some things will feel a bit above you, so don't worry about that. هذا العالم كبير. This world is great or big. So notice, there's no al here, so that's where the is goes. This is the subject, the primary element. So the subject is هذا العالم, كبير is the news, هذا العالم is the subject, and the primary element, the fundamental word of the subject is هذا, and the alam is what we call a clarifier. It's clarifying what this is. This, what's this? The world. That's literally what's being said in Arabic. This, the world, is big. It's like saying this, Margaret, the Queen, for example, is elderly or old. It's a clarifying, it's a secondary complementary element to the sentence. It's not a necessary part of the sentence. It comes to give clarification, and it's not descriptive. If it were descriptive, it's usually an adjective. If it's a standard noun like world or dog or house, it's a clarifier. And the last one, خرج الكافر الضال من المسجد. The lost, you could say misguided, but I prefer lost because the inherent meaning of dal means you're in search for something and you can't quite find it. And that's so if someone's lost in the street, you don't go up to them and say, excuse me, you look like you're misguided. You're going to say you look like you're lost. And dal that's what dal essentially means. So the lost, or the aimless disbeliever left from the mosque, a bit aimless, not knowing where he's going. Or it can mean obviously misguided in this context. So kharaja is the verb, kafiru, and dalu is a subject, 2 words there. Min al-masjid is the object. Dal is an adjective describing kafir. It's a secondary complementary element. And min al-masjid is the object, and that's a secondary independent element. So I understand that some of these details will be a little bit confusing at this stage. We will get used to them because they're essential components of the language. You're going to keep revisiting time and time again, so you'll get there. Remember, learning is through exposure, not by having to understand it straight away. And I just lost my chain of thought there about the other thing I was going to say. Yes, the most important thing here is that you can translate it. If you can translate it accurately, and even that 75%, like you're not expected to be able to translate all these ones accurately. The only ones that are you should have a bit of a grasp is probably 1 to 5 in terms of the sentence structure, or maybe 6 as well potentially. But we're going to study particles later. I put these prepositions. So as for the vocab, just again, that was just to reinforce things. I'm sure you did that with your colleagues. If you didn't, it's not a big issue. But do keep up with the vocab.